Hello, everyone. I am Pam Stewart, the chair of the board of directors of GLAAD.
And I'm Peppermint, and I'm a member of GLAAD's board of directors.
On behalf of GLAAD, we're excited to present Reclaim Our Ground, a conversation about the future of LGBTQ safety and equality in America. This is the moment we at GLAAD have been fighting for. Our news and rapid response team has been on the front lines to ensure LGBTQ issues and people are included in the conversation in this historic election. Also correcting misinformation to help voters know what's at stake and how your voice matters. LGBTQ people and queer people of color turned out in record numbers to help elect pro-equality candidates who promise to put America back on the forward path.
As the Biden-Harris administration takes office, there's much work to do to recover from the last administration, including reversing the many policy attacks that targeted transgender Americans in a year of record violence against us. The new administration has promised to make significant strides for LGBTQ equality and acceptance. GLAAD is here to make sure that happens for you.
Let's go now to Kate Sosin, who covers LGBTQ plus issues for the 19th. They're with Dana Nessel, Michigan's Attorney General and the first out person elected to statewide office in Michigan. Kate?
Thanks, Pam and Peppermint. Attorney General Nessel, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you all of you for being with us. Attorney General Nessel, I'm so glad to have you with us. How are you feeling headed into this new administration?
Well, I'm very excited for the Biden administration. I think they have the right priorities. I'm very supportive of the policies that they've talked about putting into place. I'm excited about the cabinet that President-elect Biden has put together, and so for that, and of course having the House and Senate, I mean, I truly believe that we're finally going to pass the Equality Act, which is going to be a tremendous tool to be able to use to fight discrimination against LGBTQ people all across the nation. So I'm excited about that. I'm less excited about the Supreme Court. That is a great concern to me. And I'm very worried that many of the policy gains and legislative gains that I see us truly being able to make at long last being curtailed by an incredibly right-wing Supreme Court that thinks that for some reason it's okay to utilize the First Amendment and the Free Exercise Clause in particular as more of a sword to skewer people's rights than as a shield to protect people's rights. So we're going to have to see what happens, but I imagine there's going to be many challenges to new laws and new policies now that there's this new Supreme Court in place.
You know, the Supreme Court is the first thing that's on my mind with this new administration too, which is a lot of people I think are breathing easier, LGBTQ people, but then the Supreme Court, of course, expressed interest in overturning marriage equality. And I'm curious, are you fearful about that? And what do you see as the state's roles in defending some of those rights?
Firstly, in terms of overturning, Obergefell, do I think it could happen? I do think there is some appetite for it, but what we've seen, and I think it'll be similar to what we've seen in terms of reproductive rights, instead of just outright overturning Roe v. Wade, for instance, what they do is they chip away at it until basically they haven't outlawed, abortion in its entirety, but they've made it so difficult to get one that for all intents and purposes, it's Roe v. Wade is useless. And I think they will do the same thing to Obergefell. So for instance, they might say, well, you can get a marriage license if you are a same-sex couple, but you don't have to provide same-sex marriages with the same rights and entitlements as opposite-sex marriages. So that's what I really expect to see them do. So really what we have to do, for instance, at the state level, and I will say this in the state of Michigan, we have never passed any legislation in Michigan that was in any way, shape, or form helpful to the LGBTQ community. Everything has come either in the form of executive directives or orders issued, for instance, by Governor Whitmer, or it's happened through the courts. So we really have to work hard to make sure that our state legislature passes, overturns our constitutional ban on marriage equality, which is still in the books, and has specific laws in place that for our civil rights statute, for instance, Elliott Larson, we don't have sexual orientation or gender identity included as any of the classes for our civil rights statute. So we have to include those classes. Same things with our ethnic intimidation laws, our hate crimes laws, sexual orientation, gender identity, not included. And that way we don't have to worry as much about being held to the whims of the courts because it's right there built into the statutes. I think that will be very helpful to us.
Sure, and I think a lot of people in the country probably don't know that if you are LGBTQ in a lot of states, including Michigan, you know, you do not have protections as an LGBTQ person. But Michigan is closer than it's ever been to passing those. How do you see that playing out in the next year or two in terms of passing those protections?
Well, there's a couple different vehicles for it. The best way to do it, I think, and the easiest way, of course, would just to have the state legislature pass it. Now, of note, I mean, the number of Michigan residents that support having those protections for LGBTQ people is in the high 70s, the last that I looked. But unfortunately, we remain a gerrymandered state, which means that our state legislature doesn't really appropriately reflect the values of the people who live in our state. So it's still controlled by very far right-wing Republicans who don't want to amend our state Civil Rights Act. There's a ballot initiative that's going to be on the ballot in 2022 that would specifically allow for the inclusion of sexual orientation and gender identity in our civil rights statute. And then lastly, I have a case right now that I am defending and that I am bringing through the state courts. Just yesterday, I asked for a petition to bypass the Court of Appeals and go right to the Michigan Supreme Court that would allow an interpretation of Elliott Larson so that sex and gender include sexual orientation and gender identity specifically. And honestly, I'm prepared to argue that case myself. It would be, it would be really a thrill for me to be able to do so. So I do see us with the number of vehicles moving forward to allow for those protections in Michigan. We have had some positive court rulings, but they have not really completed this cycle. And obviously Bostic was a huge case so that cases could be brought under federal law, but it didn't apply to everything, and we need it to be all inclusive. So there's a number of different vehicles to get us there. I'm confident we will eventually get to that place, but I'm very worried about what the United States Supreme Court will later do to say that those laws then cannot be enforced because somehow you are discriminating against people's First Amendment religious rights by protecting the rights of LGBTQ people, which is, I think, an insane argument, but it's been largely effective in the courts.
I'm very curious what this year has been like for you as an out elected official. And we've seen just attacks on LGBTQ people who are running, but I'm curious, you were a historic first in Michigan. Have you gotten any blowback attacks as someone who is out and elected?
Like all day, every day. I mean, I would tell you, it's been insane. To be fair, a number of elected officials in our state legislators, certainly our governor and our secretary of state, many people have been subjected and the targets of threats this year. So I don't want to say like it's only because I am an openly gay person, but it sure as hell doesn't help. I'm going to tell you that right now. And I would say that I kind of call myself, I'm the triple threat. I'm a woman, I'm openly gay, and I'm Jewish. So on any given day, like take your pick as to what folks will threaten me in regard to, and what thing they point out about me that they hate the most. So, yes, I have been the target of a lot of threats, but, again, many others have as well who are not LGBTQ. So unfortunately, it's really been a bad year in regard to hostility to public officials as a whole.
I mean, what has changed for you in terms of what you've learned about what needs to be done to keep Americans safe, given the plot against Governor Whitmer and the climate that we're in just this week alone?
Well, I think several things. Firstly, we have to start taking domestic terrorism much more seriously than we have in the past. You know, we've been willing to be very strong when it involved foreign international terrorism against the United States and the people who live here, but not so much being as introspective involving all the many extremist groups that actually exist and more and more people are becoming radicalized here in the United States. So that is a very big deal. And I think between the Department of Justice and state agencies and state departments like mine, we have to be, very serious about this. We have to put a lot of resources into it and understand the grave nature of the threat that it poses against us. But the other thing that is actually much more simple to do is we can't have political parties that are loosely affiliated with this type of extremism. And we can't have people in political office that consider some Americans to have to be less worthy of rights than other people. And so when you're talking about having a president of the United States who has been so open and so willing to support policies that erode the rights of minorities in this country, and whether that be immigrants' rights, whether it be the rights of Black and Brown people, the rights of people of different ethnicities, certainly the rights of LGBTQ people, what it does is it diminishes all of us. And, since we're on the cusp of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I would say one of his famous quotes is, an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. And so an injustice to any group of people really demeans all of us as Americans. And I think really that's got to be the takeaway, is that we cannot have one of our political parties that is dominated by the thought that all Americans are not equal. It can't just be one political party. Everyone has to subscribe to that. And we can have differences of opinions about things like, what an appropriate taxation level is, or the scope of government. But we can't have one political party that says all people deserve equal rights, and another political party that says, the Klan, not so bad after all. I mean, that's not going to be a functional society for us. And we're seeing that right now. It's not, because it emboldens extremism, and that is bad for everybody in this country.
I think we're in a moment where, for a lot of LGBTQ people, this is sort of a terrifying, it's just been a terrifying few years. It's been a terrifying few weeks, because the very humanity of a lot of folks has been questioned. And then just curious, how do you see us moving forward? And as someone who is in charge of the law and is out, do you have a message for those folks? How do you see us moving forward?
Well, I think that we just sort of have to hang tough and maintain our principles and try our best to coalesce together. And that's why I've said, whatever your gripe is with the government, especially, of course, the most recent federal government we've had in place, we really have to band together and understand that, that which unites us is so much stronger and more powerful than that which divides us. And we just really have to work together to push forward on progress and to lift each other up, and to know that there are people out there that have your back, and people like myself who are now in powerful positions of government that care deeply about the rights of all people who live in my state and all across America. And I think doing so, we just don't give up on what we know is right. One of the things I've always said is there's never a wrong time to fight for justice. And so that's what we have to continue to do, and understand and hope that by doing so, eventually we'll overcome this terrible time in our nation's history and get back to a place where we're truly making progress.
Attorney General Nessel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kate and Attorney General Nessel. Thanks also to the 19th for letting us borrow Kate to moderate. We invite you to join GLAAD. Sign up to be a member. Go to GLAAD.org to support our work for 100% acceptance of the LGBTQ community.
You can also follow GLAAD on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for real-time monitoring of LGBTQ issues, how the Biden administration is addressing them, and how the media covers them.
I'm Pam Stewart with Peppermint. Thanks for joining us.